The gunshot split the dusty air of Miller's Creek, turning every head in town. Yates Quinn stood in the middle of the street, revolver still smoking, his face a mask of stone. The would-be outlaw lay sprawled in the dirt, clutching his shoulder and moaning. "Get up," Yates commanded, his voice carrying the weight of 10 years as the most feared lawman in 3 territories. "Walk to the jail or I'll drag you there." The townsfolk watched in silence. They'd seen this scene before. Marshal Quinn wasn't known for asking twice, and certainly never for saying please. He was a man whose words came only as directives, whose reputation was built on iron will and unflinching authority. What no one expected that sweltering August day in 1875 was the stagecoach that rumbled into town, just as Yates was marching his prisoner toward the jailhouse. No one expected Clarissa Thornton to step down from that coach, her emerald dress gathering dust as her boots touched Wyoming soil for the first time. And certainly no one, least of all Yates Quinn himself, expected how completely her arrival would upend his carefully ordered world. "Madam, stand back," Yates barked as Clarissa inadvertently stepped into his path. She didn't flinch at his tone. Instead, she looked directly into his steel-gray eyes, something few men had the courage to do. "Please, Marshal," she said softly. "I'm simply trying to retrieve my luggage." The word hit Yates like a physical blow. Please, such a simple word, yet so foreign to his ears when directed at him. He felt his tongue go thick in his mouth, his next command dying before it reached his lips. Yes, of course." The words stumbled out, unfamiliar and awkward. He stepped aside, prisoner momentarily forgotten. Behind him, Deputy Wilson's jaw dropped. In 4 years, he'd never heard the marshal stammer, much less defer to anyone. Clarissa smiled, a genuine gesture that reached her eyes. "Thank you, Marshal." "Quinn," he managed. "Yates Quinn." "Clarissa Thornton," she replied, extending her gloved hand. The prisoner, sensing his captor's distraction, made a break for it. Without looking away from Clarissa's face, Yates's arm shot out, catching the man by his collar. "Wilson, take him in," Yates ordered, his voice finding its familiar authority, though his eyes never left the woman before him. Clarissa Thornton had come to Miller's Creek with a purpose. At 26, she'd left behind her life in Boston to answer a calling few women of her standing would consider establishing a proper schoolhouse in this rough frontier town. The town council had written to her employer, the Eastern Education Society, requesting a teacher who wouldn't flee at the first sign of hardship. They hadn't specified they were getting someone who could stand her ground with the most intimidating lawman west of the Mississippi. "I understand you're expecting me," she said, reaching into her satchel and producing a letter. "I'm the teacher the council requested." Yates finally broke eye contact to glance at the letter. "That's Mayor Hollister's business. His office is down the street." "I see." Clarissa nodded, retrieving her letter. "And might I inquire where I might find temporary lodging until arrangements are made?" "Widow Parker runs a boarding house, 2 buildings past the general store." His words were clipped, professional, but lacking their usual edge of command. "Thank you, Marshal Quinn," she smiled again. "I appreciate your assistance." As she walked away, Yates found himself watching her retreat, the strange feeling in his chest unfamiliar and unsettling. He'd faced down gunslingers and outlaws without blinking, but something about this woman's simple pleas had momentarily robbed him of his composure. Little did he know that this moment marked the beginning of a transformation that would challenge everything he believed about strength, control, and his carefully guarded heart. Clarissa found the boarding house easily enough. Widow Parker turned out to be a stout woman in her 50s with keen eyes that missed nothing. "So you're our new schoolmistress," she said, showing Clarissa to a modest but clean room on the 2nd floor. "About time. These children run wild as coyotes." "I look forward to the challenge," Clarissa replied, setting down her carpetbag. "I understand the schoolhouse needs significant work." "That's putting it mildly," Mrs. Parker snorted. "Been empty since Mr. Fleming took a bullet 2 years back." Town tried hiring another teacher, but he lasted all of 3 weeks before heading east. Clarissa's expression remained determined. "I'm not easily discouraged, Mrs. Parker." "We'll see about that," the widow replied, but there was a glint of approval in her eyes. "Supper's at 6 sharp. Don't be late or you'll go hungry." Left alone, Clarissa unpacked her few belongings. The room was sparse: a single bed, a washstand with a cracked mirror, a small writing desk, and a chest of drawers. Through the window, she could see the main street of Miller's Creek, dusty and busy with afternoon activity. In the distance, she spotted Marshal Quinn emerging from the jailhouse, his tall figure unmistakable. Even from this distance, she could see how others deferred to him, stepping aside as he passed. There was something compelling about him, not just his obvious authority, but something hidden beneath that stern exterior. The way he'd momentarily lost his commanding tone when she'd said "please" suggested depths that perhaps few in this town had glimpsed. The next morning, Clarissa rose early to inspect the schoolhouse. The building stood at the edge of town, its windows broken, door hanging askew. Inside, dust covered everything, and a family of mice had clearly made themselves at home. "Not exactly what you expected, is it?" She turned to find Yates Quinn standing in the doorway, his broad shoulders blocking most of the morning light. "Actually, Marshal, it's precisely what I expected," she replied, removing her gloves. "The council was quite forthright about the state of disrepair. He stepped inside, boots echoing on the wooden floor, and you still came." "I did." She met his gaze steadily. "Children deserve education regardless of where they live. Most Easterners don't last a month out here." "Then I shall have to be the exception," Clarissa said, her chin lifting slightly. "I'll need to speak with the mayor about materials for repairs. Mayor's out of town until next week." Yates looked around the dilapidated room. School term's supposed to start Monday. Clarissa assessed the challenge before her, mind already calculating what needed to be done. "Then I'll have to manage on my own until his return. You can't fix this place alone." "Is that concern I hear, Marshal Quinn?" she asked, the corner of her mouth quirking up. For a moment he seemed at a loss for words. "It's practical assessment. These repairs require a man's strength." "Perhaps," she conceded, "but as no men have volunteered their services, I'll make do." Something shifted in his expression. "I'll send Deputy Wilson and some men over this afternoon." "Thank you," Clarissa said, then added deliberately, "please." Again, that word seemed to catch him off guard. His usual mask of authority slipped for just a moment, revealing something vulnerable beneath. "They'll be here by 2, he said finally, tipping his hat before turning to leave. True to his word, by mid-afternoon, 6 men arrived at the schoolhouse, led by young Deputy Wilson. They brought lumber, tools, and a willingness to work that surprised Clarissa. "Marshal's orders," Wilson explained with a shrug when she thanked them. "Said we were to fix whatever you needed fixed, no questions asked." For the next 3 days, the men worked tirelessly. Windows were replaced, the roof patched, desks repaired, and walls whitewashed. Clarissa worked alongside them, her sleeves rolled up, hair tied back with a simple ribbon. By Saturday evening, the transformation was remarkable. Throughout those days, Yates Quinn made no appearance, though Clarissa often felt as if she were being watched. Occasionally, she would glance up to catch a glimpse of him passing by on his horse, his gaze lingering on the schoolhouse before he continued on his rounds. On Sunday afternoon, as Clarissa was arranging books on the newly built shelves, the floorboards creaked behind her. She turned to find Yates standing just inside the door, hat in hand. "Marshal Quinn," she acknowledged. "Come to inspect the work," something like that. He glanced around, approval evident despite his attempt at neutrality. "Looks proper now. Thanks to your men." She closed the primer she'd been holding. "I never had the chance to thank you personally, no need." He shifted his weight, seemingly uncomfortable with gratitude. "It's part of keeping order in town. Education keeps boys from turning into the kind of men I lock up. A surprisingly progressive view for a man of your reputation." His eyebrows rose. "My reputation." The stories about Marshal Quinn began circulating before I even reached Wyoming, she explained. A man who speaks only in commands, who's never been known to ask instead of order, who rules this territory through sheer force of will. A muscle twitched in his jaw. People talk too much. People observe, she corrected gently. As do I. And I've observed that you're more complex than those stories suggest. For a long moment he said nothing, his gray eyes studying her with an intensity that might have made her uncomfortable had she been a different sort of woman. School starts tomorrow, he finally said. How many students do you expect? The council mentioned around 20 children of school age in town. Make it 21. He placed a book on her desk, an advanced mathematics text. Billy Runyon, 17, works at the livery. Smart kid, never had proper schooling. And he wants to attend, Clarissa asked. He will attend, Yates stated automatically, then caught himself. That is, he should have the opportunity. Clarissa smiled. Then I'll be pleased to have him, provided he wishes to learn. Yates nodded, settling his hat back on his head. Good day, Miss Thornton. Good day, Marshal, and thank you. He paused at the door. For what? For caring about these children's futures when it would be easier not to. Something flashed across his face, surprise, perhaps even embarrassment at being caught in an act of kindness. Without another word, he departed, leaving Clarissa more intrigued than ever. Monday morning arrived with a brilliant sunrise. Clarissa stood at the schoolhouse door in her best blue dress, watching as children began appearing, some eager, others reluctant, all curious about the new teacher from the east. To her surprise, Yates Quinn was there too, positioned across the street, observing the proceedings with his characteristic intensity. When he caught her looking, he gave a curt nod but remained where he was. By 9 o'clock, 19 children had arrived, ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. Clarissa had just called them inside when she spotted a tall, gangly youth approaching hesitantly, cap in hand. Billy Runyon. Am I too late, madam? He asked, eyes downcast. Not at all, Billy, she replied warmly. We're just beginning. As the boy entered, Clarissa glanced back at Yates. The corner of his mouth lifted in what might almost have been a smile before he mounted his horse and rode away. The first day of school was as challenging as Clarissa had anticipated. The children's education levels varied wildly, with some barely able to recognize their letters while others read fluently. What they shared was a wariness of authority and a tendency to test boundaries at every turn. By mid-morning, the youngest boy, Tommy Jenkins, had already tried to put a snake in her desk drawer. The oldest girl, Sarah Williams, had declared reading useless for women. And the Donovan twins had engaged in 3 separate fistfights. Enough, Clarissa finally announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. The room fell silent, children watching warily for her reaction. Instead of the punishment they expected, she simply said, I need your help, please. The word worked its magic again. The children blinked in surprise, unaccustomed to adults requesting rather than demanding. We have much to accomplish together, Clarissa continued, but we can only succeed if we work as a team. Now, please open your primers to the first page. By day's end, an uneasy truce had been established. As the children filed out, Billy Runyon lingered behind. Miss Thornton, was the marshal right about me belonging here? He asked hesitantly. Do you want to learn, Billy? Yes, I want to be more than just a stable boy. Then the marshal was absolutely right. She handed him an extra primer. Practice these letters tonight. The boy's face lit up as he carefully accepted the book. Yes, thank you, Miss Thornton. As weeks passed, Clarissa established herself as a fixture in Miller's Creek. Her students, initially skeptical, gradually warmed to her approach, firm but fair, demanding yet encouraging. The townspeople, too, began to accept her, impressed by her resilience and dedication. Throughout this time, her path crossed repeatedly with Yates Quinn's. Sometimes their encounters were brief, a nod in passing, a few words exchanged on the street. Other times, more substantial, like when he appeared at the schoolhouse one afternoon with a crate of books confiscated from a peddler without a license. "These belong in a school, not gathering dust in my office," he'd explained gruffly. Clarissa had noticed the books were brand new, their pages uncut, their bindings unmarked by use. But she simply thanked him, careful to include that word please that always seemed to catch him off guard. The autumn days grew shorter, and Clarissa found herself thinking about the enigmatic Marshall more often than was proper. There was something compelling about watching the gradual softening of his demeanor, particularly around her. The command still came easily when dealing with troublemakers or giving instructions to his deputies, but with her, he seemed increasingly conscious of his tone, even occasionally catching himself mid-order and recasting his words as requests. The change wasn't lost on the townspeople. Whispers circulated about the Eastern schoolmarm who'd somehow tamed the fearsome Marshall Quinn. Some approved, others worried he was losing his edge. Yates appeared oblivious to the talk, but Clarissa heard it clearly enough. One crisp October evening, as Clarissa was walking back to the boarding house after a parent meeting, she heard rapid hoofbeats approaching. Turning, she saw Yates galloping toward town, his expression grim. He reined in sharply when he spotted her. "Get inside quickly," he ordered, then immediately moderated his tone. "Please, there's trouble coming." Before she could respond, gunshots echoed from the direction of the bank. Yates swore under his breath. Too late. Find cover now. He drew his revolver and spurred his horse toward the commotion. Clarissa hurried to the nearest building, the general store, and joined the others already seeking shelter inside. Through the window, she watched as Yates dismounted in one fluid motion and took position behind a water trough. Gun at the ready, 3 masked men emerged from the bank, firing wildly as they made for their horses. One shot struck a post inches from where Yates was crouched. With deadly precision, he returned fire, hitting one robber in the leg. The man fell, screaming, as his companions mounted up and fled. In the aftermath, as Yates secured the wounded robber and organized a posse to pursue the others, Clarissa found herself trembling with delayed fear, not for herself, but for him. The realization unsettled her deeply. In just over 2 months, this man had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Later that night, as Clarissa sat by her window unable to sleep, a soft knock came at her door. Wrapping a shawl around her nightdress, she opened it to find Mrs. Parker. "Marshall Quinn's downstairs," the widow whispered. "Says he needs a word." Quickly donning a simple day dress, Clarissa descended to find Yates standing awkwardly in the parlor, hat in hand. His coat was dusty, his face drawn with exhaustion. "I apologize for the late hour," he said quietly. "I wanted to ensure you were unharmed." "I'm fine," she assured him. "What of the bank robbers?" Caught the other 2 about 10 miles out. "They're all locked up now, and are you injured?" He shook his head. "I've had worse days." In the soft lamplight, Clarissa noticed a tear in his sleeve, stained dark with what could only be blood. "You're hurt," she said, stepping closer. "Let me see." "It's nothing," he insisted, but didn't pull away when she gently took his arm. "Please, Yates, let me help you." His first name slipped out unbidden, and they both froze momentarily. Then, wordlessly, he allowed her to examine the wound a bullet grazed across his upper arm. "Sit," she said, pointing to a chair. "Mrs. Parker keeps medical supplies in that cabinet." To her surprise, he complied without argument. As she cleaned and bandaged the wound, neither spoke, but the silence between them hummed with unspoken emotions. "Why did you really come here tonight?" she finally asked as she tied off the bandage. He looked at her then, his customary guardedness slipping. "I couldn't rest without knowing you were safe. There are 20 other women in town. I don't care about 20 other women." The words seemed to surprise him as much as her. Clarissa's heart quickened. "What are you saying, Marshall?" "I don't know," he admitted, a vulnerability in his voice she'd never heard before. "Only that when those shots were fired, my first thought was of you." The confession hung in the air between them. After a long moment, Clarissa gently placed her hand over his. "Thank you for coming to check on me," she said softly. "Please be careful out there." Something in his expression shifted, his eyes warming. "I will. Good night, Clarissa." As he left, Clarissa knew with certainty that whatever was growing between them had just irrevocably changed. And she wasn't entirely sure what to do about it. The next few weeks brought a palpable shift in their interactions. Yates began finding reasons to walk past the schoolhouse during recess. Clarissa discovered interests in evening strolls that often coincided with his final rounds. Their conversations, once brief and practical, lengthened and deepened. The town noticed. Mrs. Parker gave Clarissa knowing looks over breakfast. Deputy Wilson developed a sudden coughing fit whenever Yates mentioned the schoolteacher. Even Clarissa's students picked up on the change, giggling when the marshal appeared at the schoolhouse door one afternoon with a repaired clock the town had no use for. November arrived with bitter winds and the first dusting of snow. Preparations for Thanksgiving occupied the town, with plans for a community celebration at the newly completed church. 3 days before the holiday, Yates appeared at the schoolhouse after classes had ended. Clarissa was arranging student artwork, hand-traced turkeys and carefully written lists of blessings. "This is quite the display," he commented, examining the children's work. "They've worked hard," she replied, pleased by his interest. "Many have never celebrated Thanksgiving properly before." "Neither have I, truth be told." He picked up one of the papers. "Billy's improved, his writing's almost legible now. He's dedicated. Working at the livery all day, then studying by lamplight." She smiled. "He reminds me of someone else I know, determined, hard-working." Yates glanced at her, a question in his eyes. "You," she clarified. "Though I suspect no one ever told you please until recently." He set down Billy's paper. "My father believed commands were the only way to raise a son. Orders build men was his philosophy." "And did they build the man you wanted to be?" He considered this, his expression thoughtful. "They built a marshal who keeps order, a man people respect or at least fear enough to obey." "But is that all you want to be? Feared and obeyed?" For a long moment he was silent. Then, with uncharacteristic openness, he said, "No, not anymore." The admission hung between them, weighted with implication. Clarissa felt her heart race as he stepped closer. "Clarissa," he began, then hesitated. "Would you, that is, I was wondering if you might consider accompanying me to the Thanksgiving celebration?" It wasn't quite a request, not entirely a command, but something beautifully in between, a man learning a new way to speak, to connect. "I would be delighted," she answered, her smile radiant. Relief and happiness transformed his face. "I'll call for you at 5 if that's agreeable." "Perfect." He lingered a moment longer, seemingly on the verge of saying more, then simply tipped his hat and departed, his stride lighter than when he'd arrived. Thanksgiving Day dawned clear and cold. Clarissa spent the morning helping at the church, arranging tables and decorating with autumn leaves and dried corn husks. By afternoon, savory aromas filled the air as women from across town arrived with their contributions to the feast. At precisely 5 o'clock, Yates knocked on the boarding house door. Mrs. Parker answered, making a poor show of hiding her approval as she ushered him into the parlor. "Clarissa will be down directly," she informed him, then added in a lower voice, "You've done well, Marshal. She's a good woman." Before Yates could respond, footsteps on the stairs drew their attention. Clarissa descended wearing a burgundy dress that complemented her dark hair, which she'd arranged in an elegant knot at the nape of her neck. Yates stood transfixed, hat clutched in his hands. "You look—" He trailed off, searching for adequate words. "Thank you," she said, saving him from his struggle. "You're quite handsome yourself." Indeed, he'd clearly made an effort, wearing a crisp white shirt beneath his best black coat, his usually unruly hair neatly combed. He offered his arm. "Shall we?" The church was transformed, long tables arranged down the center, candles and lanterns casting a warm glow over the festive scene. Nearly the entire town had turned out, creating a buzz of conversation and laughter. As Yates and Clarissa entered together, a momentary hush fell before conversations resumed, now interspersed with curious glances and whispered comments. If Yates noticed, He gave no sign, guiding Clarissa to seats near the front where Mayor Hollister and other town officials were gathered. "Miss Thornton, Marshall," the mayor greeted them enthusiastically. "Wonderful to see you both." Together, he added with a meaningful look that made Clarissa blush. The evening progressed pleasantly. The food was abundant, the company genial. Yates, usually taciturn in social settings, made a visible effort to engage, asking questions and listening attentively to responses. Clarissa watched him with growing affection, touched by his willingness to step outside his comfort zone. After the meal, as musicians set up for dancing, Yates leaned close to her ear. "Would you care for some air? It's gotten rather warm in here." She nodded, and they slipped outside into the crisp night. Stars blazed overhead in the clear sky, their breath forming small clouds in the frosty air. They walked in companionable silence to a small bench beside the church. Settling beside her, Yates seemed to gather his courage before speaking. "I'm not good with words," he began, "not the kind that matter anyway." "I think you underestimate yourself," Clarissa replied gently. He shook his head. "For 10 years I've spoken only to direct, to command. I forgot there were other ways to communicate." He looked at her directly. "Until me, that first day when you said please, it was like waking up from a long sleep. No one had spoken to me that way in years, like I was a man, not just a badge." Clarissa felt her heart constrict. "Is that how you see yourself? As only the law?" "It was safer that way," he admitted. "Easier to keep everyone at a distance. And now—" He reached for her hand, his touch tentative. "Now I find myself wanting to be closer, to you specifically." The honesty in his voice moved her deeply. "I feel the same way, Yates." "Do you?" Hope brightened his eyes. "Even knowing who I am, what I've been, I see who you are," she said firmly. "A good man learning to be a better one, that's all any of us can aspire to." In the silver moonlight, his expression softened. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward. Their lips met in a gentle kiss, brief but full of promise. When they parted, Yates looked at her with wonder. "Please," he whispered, the word no longer foreign on his tongue, "may I court you properly, Clarissa Thornton?" Her answer was another kiss, this one leaving no doubt about her feelings. Winter settled over Miller's Creek with a vengeance. Heavy snows blanketed the town, transforming the landscape into a pristine white wilderness. School continued despite the weather, with Yates insisting on escorting Clarissa through the worst storms. Their courtship progressed steadily, becoming the town's favorite topic of conversation. The fearsome Marshall, who now asked rather than ordered, who smiled more frequently, who had been seen carrying the schoolteacher's books, and even, on one memorable occasion, laughing openly at something she said. For Clarissa, each day brought new discoveries about the man behind the badge. He was well-read, having educated himself through long nights alone in various frontier outposts. He played chess with remarkable skill. He could identify every constellation in the night sky. And most surprisingly, he wrote poetry, rough-hewn verses he showed no one but her. As Christmas approached, excitement built among Clarissa's students. Many had never experienced a proper Christmas celebration, and she was determined to provide one. She organized a pageant, assigned parts, and began rehearsals. 2 weeks before the holiday, disaster struck. A blizzard roared through the region, collapsing the schoolhouse roof under the weight of snow. No one was injured. The building had been empty overnight, but the damage was extensive. Clarissa stood amid the ruins, heart sinking as she surveyed the snow-covered books, the splintered desks, the ruined decorations her students had worked so hard to create. "We'll rebuild," came Yates's voice behind her. He'd arrived minutes after hearing the news, concern etched on his face. "Better than before." "That will take weeks," she said, fighting tears. The children were so looking forward to their Christmas celebration. He considered this, then nodded decisively. "The town hall, it's smaller, but it will serve. The council uses it for meetings. They can meet elsewhere until repairs are complete." His tone held its old authority, but now tempered with kindness. "Please, Clarissa, let me arrange this for you for the children. The sincerity in his eyes melted her resistance. "Thank you." The next day, Yates mobilized the town. Men cleared the damaged schoolhouse, salvaging what could be saved. Women organized temporary classroom materials. By week's end, the town hall had been transformed into a schoolroom complete with a small stage for the upcoming pageant. "How did you convince the council?" Clarissa asked, marveling at the speed of the transformation. Yates smiled enigmatically. "I said please." Christmas Eve arrived clear and cold. The town hall was packed with parents, siblings, and townspeople eager to see the children perform. Backstage, Clarissa calmed nervous young actors, straightened angel wings, and adjusted shepherd's robes. "Miss Thornton," Billy Runyon approached, looking uncomfortable in his wise man's costume. "There's someone here to see you." She followed him to find Yates waiting, holding a small package wrapped in brown paper and string. "I wanted to wish you luck before the performance," he said, "and to give you this." "But we agreed to exchange gifts tomorrow," she protested weakly, already reaching for the package. This one couldn't wait. Curious, she unwrapped it to reveal a small velvet box. Her breath caught as she opened it to find a delicate gold ring set with a single pearl. "It was my mother's," Yates explained, his voice low. "The only beautiful thing my father ever gave her." Clarissa looked up at him, her heart thundering in her chest. "I'm not asking yet," he clarified quickly. "That deserves to be done properly when I'm worthy of you, but I wanted you to know my intentions, that this is where my heart is heading, if you'll allow it." "Oh, Yates," she whispered, tears threatening. He gently closed her fingers around the box. "Keep it for now, as a promise of what's to come." Before she could respond, Tommy Jenkins came barreling around the corner. "Miss Thornton, Sarah forgot her lines and the shepherds are fighting again." The moment broken, Clarissa tucked the precious box into her pocket. "Duty calls," she said with a smile. "Will you stay for the performance?" "I wouldn't miss it," Yates assured her. "I'll be in the back, keeping order." The pageant proceeded with only minor disasters: a fallen angel wing, one shepherd briefly forgetting he wasn't actually a cowboy, and Mary nearly dropping baby Jesus, a carefully swaddled doll. Through it all, Clarissa beamed with pride, occasionally catching Yates's eye from his position at the back of the hall. As the children took their final bow to enthusiastic applause, Clarissa felt a profound sense of belonging. This rough frontier town had become her home in ways Boston never had. These children, their parents, the community that had embraced her, and most of all, the man whose steady gaze found hers across the crowded room, had given her something she hadn't realized she was seeking. After the performance, as families dispersed into the snowy night, Yates appeared at her side. "May I walk you home?" he asked, offering his arm. Outside, the town was transformed by freshly fallen snow glittering under a canopy of stars. They walked in companionable silence, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "The children were wonderful," Yates said as they neared the boarding house. "They worked so hard," Clarissa agreed. "I'm proud of them. They adore you," he glanced down at her. "As does most of the town." "Only most," she teased. He stopped walking, turning to face her. Snowflakes caught in her dark hair, and he reached up to gently brush them away. "One resident feels considerably more than adoration," he said softly. The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Yates, I love you, Clarissa Thornton." The words emerged clearly, without hesitation. "I never thought I'd say those words to anyone, never thought I'd feel this way, but you changed everything when you said please and looked at me like I was a man worth seeing." Joy bloomed in her chest, warm despite the winter chill. "I love you too." He drew her closer, his kiss tender but full of promise. When they parted, snowflakes danced between them, and Clarissa felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. "Merry Christmas, Yates," she whispered. "Merry Christmas, my love." Spring came slowly to Wyoming, the snow reluctantly giving way to mud before finally surrendering to green grass and wildflowers. The schoolhouse had been rebuilt, larger and sturdier than before, with proper windows that flooded the room with light. Throughout those months, Yates and Clarissa's relationship deepened. He continued his gradual transformation, still commanding when necessary but increasingly comfortable with requests, with vulnerability, with the give and take of partnership rather than the isolation of authority. The town watched with approval as their marshal softened without weakening, as he became more approachable while maintaining the respect necessary for his position. Children no longer scattered at his approach but greeted him by name. Townspeople brought concerns to him more readily, finding him willing to listen rather than merely pronounce judgment. And if anyone doubted the cause of this change, they needed only to see how his expression transformed when the schoolteacher entered a room, how the stern lines of his face relaxed, how his eyes warmed, how sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, he smiled just watching her teach or talk or simply exist in his world. For Clarissa, these months brought a deepening certainty that she had found her place not just in Miller's Creek, but at this man's side. The promise ring remained in its box, a tangible reminder of what awaited when he deemed himself ready. She wore it only in private, a secret joy between them. One evening in late May, as wildflowers painted the prairie in swaths of color, Yates asked Clarissa to join him for a ride outside town. "There's something I'd like to show you," he said, uncharacteristically nervous. They rode for about 30 minutes, cresting a gentle hill that overlooked a small valley. A creek meandered through it, bordered by cottonwoods just coming into full leaf. In the center stood the frame of a house newly erected, the wood still raw and unweathered. Clarissa looked at Yates questioningly. "It's not much yet," he said, dismounting and helping her down from her horse. "But by summer's end it'll be a proper home," understanding dawned. "Your home, our home," he corrected gently. "If you'll have it, if you'll have me." He reached into his pocket and withdrew the familiar velvet box. This time he opened it himself, removing the pearl ring before dropping to one knee. "Clarissa Thornton, I've spent my life giving orders, believing that was the only way to be strong. You taught me the power of please, the strength in gentleness, the courage in vulnerability." His voice was steady but full of emotion. "Please, will you marry me?" Tears of joy spilled down Clarissa's cheeks. "Yes, Yates, yes, please." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to gather her in his arms. Their kiss was a promise, a beginning, a declaration. When they finally parted, Yates gestured toward the half-built house. "I thought we could finish it together, make it ours from the foundation up." "It's perfect," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "When did you start this?" "The day after Christmas," he admitted. "I knew then I couldn't wait much longer to make you my wife. Yet you waited until now to ask," he smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I wanted to be certain I was worthy of you, that I'd truly changed." "Oh, Yates," she said softly, "you were always worthy, you just needed to believe it yourself." They were married on the last day of the school term, with Clarissa's students forming an honor guard outside the church, tossing flower petals as the newlyweds emerged. The entire town turned out for the celebration, which lasted well into the night. Throughout the evening, Clarissa noticed how easily Yates now moved among the townspeople, laughing, conversing, at ease in a way that would have been unimaginable when she first arrived. He still commanded respect, but now it was given freely rather than extracted through intimidation. As they prepared to leave the celebration, Mayor Hollister called for attention. "Before our guests of honor depart, I have an announcement," he proclaimed. "As many of you know, I've been considering retirement for some time. Today, I've submitted my formal resignation to the council, effective immediately." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Furthermore," the mayor continued, "I've recommended Marshal Quinn as my replacement." Stunned silence followed, broken by Yates's voice. "Mr. Mayor, I appreciate the consideration, but the council voted this morning," Hollister interrupted. "Unanimously in favor. Miller's Creek needs a mayor who understands both strength and compassion. You've demonstrated both, son." Clarissa squeezed her new husband's hand supportively as he gathered his thoughts. "I'm honored by your confidence," Yates finally said. If the town truly wants me to serve in this capacity, I will do my best to be worthy of your trust." Cheers erupted, glasses raised in toast to the new mayor and his bride. Later, as they rode in the moonlight toward their partially completed home, where they would camp until construction was finished, Clarissa asked, "Are you pleased about the mayorship?" Yates considered the question carefully. "I am. It feels right, a new chapter to match our new beginning." "You'll be magnificent," she assured him. "You already command respect, now you can lead with your heart as well." He smiled, the expression now coming naturally to him. "I've had an excellent teacher in that regard." They reached the house, their house, and Yates helped her down before sweeping her into his arms to carry her across the threshold of what would soon be their front door. Inside, he had prepared a surprise. A small space finished enough for their wedding night, with a proper bed, a table with 2 chairs, and lanterns casting a warm glow over the rough-hewn walls. "It's not much yet," he said, setting her gently on her feet. But Clarissa silenced him with a kiss. "It's everything," she whispered against his lips, "because it's ours." Their first night as husband and wife was spent in that unfinished house under a canopy of stars visible through the open rafters, planning their future, dreaming together, loving each other with the deep certainty of 2 people who had found their perfect match. "I never expected you," Yates murmured as they lay wrapped in each other's arms. "Never thought I'd find someone who could see past the badge, past the harshness. And I never imagined falling in love with a man who spoke only in commands," she teased gently. "Yet here we are." "Here we are," he agreed, drawing her closer, "and here we'll stay." As summer bloomed across the Wyoming territory, the Quinn house took shape, a sturdy structure with large windows to capture the light Clarissa loved, a wide porch for evening conversations, and plenty of room for the family they hoped to create. Yates took to his new role as mayor with the same dedication he'd shown as marshal, though his approach was markedly different. Where once he would have imposed solutions, he now sought consensus. Where he might have dictated terms, he facilitated discussion. The town flourished under his leadership, growing in both size and prosperity. Clarissa continued teaching, her schoolhouse now filled to capacity as families from surrounding areas sent their children to benefit from her progressive educational methods. She started an evening class for adults as well, teaching reading and mathematics to those who had never had the opportunity to learn. In late summer, as they sat on their completed porch watching the sunset paint the prairie in gold and crimson, Clarissa turned to her husband with a smile that held a secret. "I have news," she said, taking his hand and placing it gently on her stomach. "We'll need that extra bedroom sooner than we thought." Yates's expression transformed from confusion to wonder to joy in the span of heartbeats. "A baby, truly, truly," she confirmed, laughing as he gathered her into a careful embrace. "When?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "February, the doctor thinks." He pressed his forehead to hers, overwhelmed. "I never thought I could be this happy," he confessed. "Never knew it was possible to feel this complete." "All because of a please," she reminded him gently. "All because you saw something in me worth saving," he corrected. "Worth loving." As twilight deepened around them, they remained on the porch, talking softly of the future, of the child who would join them, of the life they were building together. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," Yates said as stars began appearing overhead. "Something I've wondered since that first day." "What's that?" "Why did you come to Miller's Creek? Truly, a woman of your education, your background, you could have taught anywhere. Why choose a rough frontier town?" Clarissa considered her answer carefully. "I wanted to make a difference, to go where I was needed, not just wanted." "Is that all?" he pressed gently. "No," she admitted with a small smile. "I was also looking for something I couldn't name, something missing from my life in Boston. I found it here." "What was it?" She touched his face, tracing the lines that were softer now than when she'd first met him. "Purpose, community, love, you." He turned his head to kiss her palm. "Please stay with me forever," he whispered, the words both command and request wrapped in love. Always, she promised. That's one order I'll gladly obey. Their daughter, Elizabeth, was born on a snowy February night in 1877, arriving with her mother's dark hair and her father's determined spirit. As Yates held his newborn child for the first time, Clarissa saw in his face a tenderness he once would have hidden, a vulnerability he would once have denied. "She's perfect," he whispered, awestruck. "She is," Clarissa agreed tiredly from the bed. "And she's ours." In the years that followed, the Quinns became the heart of Miller's Creek. Their home, completed with a nursery painted yellow at Clarissa's insistence, stood as a symbol of the community's evolution from rough frontier outpost to thriving town. Two more children joined their family, James in 1879 and Sarah in 1882. Yates proved to be a devoted father, firm but gentle, teaching his children the value of both strength and kindness. Clarissa expanded her educational initiatives, eventually establishing a proper academy that drew students from across the territory. Her methods became renowned, with educators from as far as Denver coming to observe her techniques. Yates served 3 terms as mayor before declining to run again, preferring to focus on his growing family and the law practice he had established. His reputation for fairness and integrity made him sought after for legal matters throughout Wyoming. On warm summer evenings, the family could often be found on their porch, Yates and Clarissa watching their children play in the yard, their hands clasped together, their hearts full. "You remember that day when I first arrived?" Clarissa asked one such evening as they celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary. "When you ordered me to stand back," Yates chuckled, the sound rich and genuine. "I remember being completely thrown when you said please. No one had addressed me that way in years. And now." He looked around at their home, their children, the life they had built together. "Now I understand the power of that word, of asking rather than demanding, of invitation rather than command." He squeezed her hand gently. "You changed me, Clarissa, for the better." "We changed each other," she corrected softly. "And Miller's Creek too, I think." Indeed, the town had transformed almost as much as its former marshal. Where once saloons and gambling halls dominated, now stood a proper hotel, a library, donated by a wealthy cattle baron whose son had thrived under Clarissa's teaching, and businesses that catered to families rather than drifters. As darkness fell and the children were tucked into bed, Yates and Clarissa returned to the porch alone, sitting close together on the swing he had built for their 5th anniversary. 15 years ago, if someone had described this life to me, I would have called them a fool, he mused, his arm around her shoulders. A wife, 3 children, a home filled with laughter instead of loneliness. It would have seemed impossible. Not impossible, Clarissa corrected gently. Just waiting for the right moment, the right word. "Please," he whispered, smiling at the memory. "Please," she agreed, turning her face up for his kiss. Under the vast Wyoming sky, surrounded by the life they had created together, the former man of commands and the woman who had taught him to ask found themselves exactly where they were meant to be, bound by love, strengthened by understanding, and forever grateful for the power of one simple word that had changed everything.